mental capability of understanding what's going on and the difference between right and wrong. And there needs to be a cry across this country. We're seeing, a great deal of gun violence and other violence, and people potentially are getting weapons that shouldn't have them because there's not proper mental, health, treatment in this country. Again, more federal funding, more state funding needs to be put into the criminal justice system, where people who are incarcerated or people who do come in contact with the system, hopefully for minor offenses, can be screened and can get the help that they need, and the system can actually help rehabilitate as opposed to just punish people and, potentially put them back on the street more dangerous than they were when they left it.
That's an excellent point. Joe Scott, so say you.
Yeah, I look at this from a different perspective. What we can do from the forensic standpoint is being in public safety and being a forensic scientist, you sit back and you truly, you see it in the courts, but when you're out on the scenes of these cases like this over a period of time, it wears on you so deeply. You hear the screams, you smell the blood, you see the horror that's wrought. And in public safety, you feel so very frustrated because there was nothing that you could have done individually to prevent what you're now documenting. So the only recompense that we really have as practitioners is to go out and, sit there and do the best possible job that we can, collect all of the evidence in the correct way. The court is going to do what the court is going to do with the evidence that we present. We have to do our job, in all cases, but cases like this, you particularly want to be fully aware of what you're doing. You don't want to screw up because this child's life will have been lived in vain. You have to, for no other reason, for his memory alone, do the best possible job that you can to document everything and collect it. It's no matter how many of these you work appropriately and you do correctly, you sit there as a practitioner and it's almost like spitting in the ocean. It doesn't do too much to raise the water level. It's the same old thing over and over again, and it's very hard.
Absolutely. Final story is life sentence for a man who pushed his wife to death off a cliff. Was it the right call for the judge or wrong call? Let's listen to the sound and talk on the other side.
A murder case 3 years in the making that has made headlines across our country comes to a close today with Harold Henthorn being sentenced to life in prison. Now, we knew that Harold Henthorn would be going to jail for the rest of his life. The hearing today, more than anything, was a chance for the victims' families to speak, to talk about what they lost, and to address Henthorn directly. Back in 2012, Henthorn shoved his wife, Toni, off of a cliff during what was supposed to be their anniversary celebration in Rocky Mountain National Park. He has claimed that she accidentally fell. What was especially shocking about this case, we found out that Henthorn is also suspected of killing his first wife years before in another scenario where he claimed there was a tragic accident. In both deaths, Henthorn raked in huge money from life insurance policies he had on his wives. Now, one of the people who spoke in court today was Henthorn's former sister-in-law. And if you can believe it, she says that he also took out a life insurance policy on her. She believes that he was the next victim on his list.
After all that I've learned through studying the case over the last 3 years, I have no question that he was, this was a business. I didn't question him. I trusted him. I was his perfect victim.
And the biggest surprise in court today is that Harold Henthorn decided to speak on his own behalf, and even as he heads to prison for the rest of his life, he is maintaining that he's innocent, saying that he didn't kill Toni or anybody. His lawyer says he will appeal his conviction. We're live in Denver. Lindsay Watts, Denver 7.
All right, Bob, what's your thoughts on this? Do you think they got it right? Do you think this is the right ruling for this case?
Yes, I mean this is an intentional act. If they have the evidence and the conviction to support it of a man pushing his wife off of a cliff, that's an intentional murder and an intentional death, and the sentence fits the crime. It's an interesting set of facts, as I remember covering this case a couple of months ago with Nancy Grace on HLN, where his first wife, I think it was like something like 20 to 30 years prior, died changing a tire on the side of the road in the middle of the night. Surprisingly, she was the one under the car changing the tire, and the car fell on top of her. So how he convinced his wife to change a tire in the middle of the night on the side of the road and get under a car is a question that will probably never be answered. But it seems as if this individual had it out for insurance money, and that's exactly what he gained from it. But it seems as if his act caught up with him, so to speak. So, I mean, the punishment definitely fits the crime. I mean, the criminal justice system spoke. He was convicted of an intentional homicide, and with that, in most states comes life in prison, and other states it involves the death penalty. So, it definitely fits the crime.
Alex Sanchez, your take on this case?
This guy, by the way, he falls in the evil category. I mean, he may have some mental issues, but we're talking planning and greed and every other negative you could think of. But as horrible as the events were, and as bad as I think this guy was, and as guilty as I think he is, I think he's got a chance of having his case reversed on appeal. Because the incident supposedly occurred at the top of a mountain. Nobody was there. And she falls off a cliff. Okay, he had life insurance on her. But, is there some other evidence that maybe I'm not aware of that points to the fact that he pushed her off that cliff? Or are you just going to, engage in guesswork that he must have killed her because he happened to have life insurance? That's not enough in my view. So there better be something...
the similar... wife died on
her. The jury's never going to hear that, though.
That's right. The
jury's never going to hear that. It's so prejudicial. He wasn't charged with it. It's not an uncharged crime or a bad act, and it wasn't a prior conviction. So no juror is ever going to hear that.
Nothing to do with the trial. So what other evidence is there suggesting that he pushed her off the cliff, other than the great suspicion that I have that he in fact did it? Because if there is no other evidence other than the fact that he has life insurance, you know what? That's not enough. And when it goes up on appeal, that is exactly what the argument's going to be. And it wouldn't surprise me if in this case, in our system of justice, you can appeal a guilty verdict. And it wouldn't surprise me if that case was reversed, as guilty as I think he is.
Yeah, that's the way it tends to work. Joe, Scott. So say you.
Cases like this, we've seen any number of things like this happen in the past regarding folks that kind of commit these serialized crimes, and I don't want to lump this guy in with a serial killer. Don't misunderstand me, but it's almost as if they gain a comfort level with engaging in this kind of behavior, where there's going to be a big payout in the end. Alex is absolutely right. This is not mental illness like we were talking about that poor unfortunate little boy that was stabbed to death. This is a case where you've got a potential predator that is engaging in this. He's put a lot of thought into this. There's a premeditative factor. But this is the rub. Even if they suspect that this guy did, in fact, push his wife off of the edge of the cliff, saving him, openly admitting this without duress, how are you going to prove it from a physical evidence standpoint? You say his DNA is on it. Well, they're married. They're on a anniversary trip. Wouldn't his DNA been on it anyway? And when you fall from a height of 150 feet or 130 feet onto an uneven, rocky surface, how are you going to delineate any other kind of injury she may have sustained prior to the fact that she fell over the edge and impacted all these sharp rocks and these other protuberant areas along the pathway to lowest point of gravity? You can't. There's no way to delineate that. So, very difficult uphill struggle. I agree with Alex. I think there's probably going to be the potential that he could appeal it. Now, whether or not they have more information and he would be successful, I don't know. You cannot, from an investigative standpoint, it's going to raise my my red flag if I'm aware of this guy's other wife dying in a suspicious circumstances. But I can only take that so far investigatively. That's not something I can bring before a grand jury, and certainly into court. I can't drag that information in there because it's not going to be admissible. It's too prejudicial. So, tough case. Very unfortunate circumstance.
Absolutely. Let's go out to Virginia. Let's say hello to caller Mary Wainwright joins us. Good evening, Mary. You're live with the panel. Question or thought?
Hi.
Yeah, it's Mary.
Can you hear me?
Do we have you? Yes.
Because, I live out in the country, so sometimes I can't get through. But we got really interesting cases tonight, and hello to the panel.
Hello, Mary.
Hi, Mary.
Nice to meet you.
Are they there? Hi.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Hey,
I just have a few things to say. The Dippolito case, which is the first defense by my question is, where is the script? We're doing this to get attention by media. They had to have some. Never mentioned that. She went through a whole trial and never said, oh, by the way, this was all a pretend reality TV show. And where is the script that they supposedly were to follow?
Well, Alex, you brought that up earlier.
That's an excellent point that she's bringing up. I mean, the fact of the matter is that she had never brought this up. And now, 3 years later, or 4 years later, suddenly they're coming up with this theory that it was all, reality TV show stuff. Well, she's going to have to testify to that, right?
Right.
But once she testifies and she puts the credibility on the stand, she's going to be accused by the prosecution of engaging in recent fabrication. And then the prosecution is going to be allowed to ask her, well, when was the first time you brought this up to somebody? Did you ever tell the police this? And then she's going to have to say no.
Right.
And so I think that she's doomed to failure here because, number one, the story sounds ridiculous. Number two, she never brought it up. And number three, I think the lawyers are going to look mighty suspicious in the minds of the jury that they somehow had something to do with putting her up to this story. And that's not something any lawyer should ever be doing, if in fact that happened here.
And that's sad to hear that, or, my point is, if there was such a reality TV in the making, there had to have been something. You can't have a pretend reality TV, and even though it's whatever comes to your mind, you have to follow some kind of a storyline, some kind of a script, and something should have been written in a book that they could have said, see, that's a plan reality from, you see? And
I think that had they had a whole written script, as you said, or a lot of documentation that was generated back then, and a lot of handwritten notes about this script and about a reality show and letters to producers, then maybe you could conceivably make that argument. As far as I know, there's none of that. So this sounds very suspicious to me. I'm sorry.
Another comment. to Bob Scott on the Freddie Gray